When stories are no longer told and retold, the culture fades and the people are forgotten. We are not shy about remembering out loud our story. The National Film and Video Foundation, as an agency of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, was created to ensure the equitable growth of South Africa's film and video industry. Our vision is embedded in an inclusive, diverse, and sustainable audiovisual ecosystem that tells South African stories to local and global audiences. We are the custodian of South Africa's film and video industry, committed to ensuring its equitable growth. The NFVF loves South African film and lets stories speak.
Good morning and welcome to the second day of the NFVF's Independent Producers Organisation, an executive producer at Story Scope, and a general lady about town, as they say. Thank you so much for joining us. The NFVF really wanted to have this session today because there's a big gap in the way producers and people in the film and filmmakers in general understand what the distribution is, how it works, trying to understand when they should be approaching distributors. And for that reason, we have on the panel today, Mainzeki Baza, who is from AAA Entertainment, Helen Kun from Indigenous Films Distribution, and Diane Hay from Gravel Road. Welcome, all three of you. How are you?
Good, thank you, Thandi. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thank you, Thandi. We're all good, thanks.
Great. I think I wanted to start, Diane, you don't have a face at this point, but I wanted to start, oh, there we go, thank you. I wanted to start by, I think, asking the most basic question, because I think for a lot of producers, they don't understand distribution at all. So I'm going to start by asking, what is a distributor? So we can explain to everyone in the country exactly what a distributor is and what a distributor does. And I'm going to start with you, Di, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the distributor is basically is your link. The distributor is your person that is the business of your film. They're the ones that represent your film on the various platforms that it's available on. The distributor is the person that does the deal making, signs the contracts, helps you, guides you, mentors you along, assists with the marketing, assists with all the engagements with the various industry stakeholders, being it broadcast, cinema. Your distributor is the person that basically, as a filmmaker, you want to have in your corner to help and guide you through the entire process of getting your film from what you've created out for the world to see it.
Great. And tell me a little bit about Gravel Road and how you ended up in distribution. I think it's always a good journey. Some of us become producers, some of us become actors. How did your journey in distribution start? And tell us a bit about what your company does and how it works.
Well, yeah, my personal journey started as a DVD merchandiser and pick and pay. So I've been really at the coalface of distribution right from the beginning. But I've been on a distributor possibly all my life in the industry. Like I say, starting in home entertainment, in DVD, retail, moving on to exhibition and distribution in New Metro Cinemas, and then finally, very recently, joining Gravel Road Distribution Group here in Cape Town, where we basically are. We're a distribution company, we're a sales agency, we buy and sell films, we acquire, we do local films, we do everything. So we're not just a distributor, we're a sales agent, we're a consultant, and that is who we are.
Thanks. And Helen, also a little bit about you and Indigenous, but tell me, for the audience, what is the difference between a distributor and a sales agent?
First and foremostly, those lines are becoming so blurred, Thandi, with this new environment that we are in, because obviously the first port of call for a distributor is to get content out on as many platforms as possible. So that would incorporate the whole scope, right, in a particular territory, from And it may include all of these platforms or only some, or it may include all of them over a period of time. So from cinema to, pay-per-view or TVOD, or EST, where you either pay to rent a particular film or you pay to download and own that film. And, I'm talking about films, but obviously this incorporates series as well. These days, more and more limited series. But let's focus on film because it works well to explain the principle. So following that classically would be a pay television window, which in this territory would be either Mnet or MultiChoice or Canal Plus. They're the biggest pay TV channels here or groups. And then after that would be streaming classically, if it falls into the classic window. Subscription VOD and free TV live next to one another. So that's the classic flow of matters. But you could also, as you all know, because of the change in landscape, there's more and more deals being done that we refer to as direct to service. So you can either sell, and we do that too. We all do that. All of us do that. Sell directly to a streamer or directly to a broadcaster or directly to something like a DSTV box office. You launch on there directly, not necessarily going out into cinema. And that classically was always based on your territory. So for us, we used to function in Africa only. But that has changed. So we all overlap. Because if you're selling content to a streamer these days, you could do a deal that is a worldwide deal, or it could be Africa plus a couple of territories. So the streaming evolution is basically enhanced and empowered the whole content distribution from Africa to the world significantly so. You don't have to, like you would have done classically, have a distributor in every single territory around the world that will handle all these platforms. It still happens. There's just a new way that's been added to the process. So, selling a film from markets, if you're a sales agent, if that's your key focus, and selling it to various distributors around the world, that still happens. So it is somewhat of a gray area, I guess, with where it overlaps these days. We all tend to fulfill both functions to an extent.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about Indigenous. For those of our audiences who don't know who you are and what Indigenous does.
Okay, Indigenous. So it's Indigenous Film Distribution and Development. Now we branched out into 3 or 4 years ago, to develop content as well directly from the start. So that was a new addition to the fold of what we do. But we focus exclusively on local content. So the definition of that is obviously largely South African, but it is increasingly becoming African to an extent. It all depends on the availability of titles. To be able to represent something, you have to be able to find it. Now, that has become easier somewhat with COVID, with festivals and events being online. So access from here to the rest of the continent outside of our own industry has become more streamlined. But our focus remains, we're particularly and exclusively focused on local content and finding audiences for that around the world as well as at home. And we've been around for 14 years now. Actually, I couldn't believe it when I checked it myself the other day. So we have released over 140 titles in this time. It's across all platforms, Some were direct to services, some were a mix of platforms, but we aim to be and try to be a one-stop shop that we can in fact develop content where we would work with you. Otherwise, content might come to us either in development phase or a distribution phase. And then we can equally obviously pick up content or license content when it's already made or there's an assembly of it. So I think it's actually a great period now for all the local filmmakers and TV producers, because there's more and more places to sell the content onto. As you know yourself, Thandi, you've got a Senzo's on Netflix at the moment. So,
yes. Thanks. And Zeki, tell us a little bit about AAA Entertainment. Firstly, I want to hear about the company, how you guys are founded, what you're out there doing, and then once you've done that, could you tell us what the appetite is for South African content that you've seen over the years of AAA? Have you seen an increase in wanting content from the continent? And what kind of content are you seeing selling well from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Thandi. Your question is a very difficult one, but I'll get to it. I think once I've given you a bit of background of who we are, just maybe, I mean, I was born in the Eastern Cape, me personally, right? In a province that probably there isn't any sort of a thriving film and television business. So, so I got into the industry. I bought myself as an investor, right? So I've always looked at the film business purely from a commercial perspective. So producer myself, produce documentaries and feature films, travel all over the markets just to try and figure out how to finance the things I'm creating. Whether it be film, fiction or documentaries per se, where I think myself and the founder of the company, Pascal Schmitz and Mawande, you know, we sort of realized that there was a gap in the market. So when we started, let's say 2013, as Distributor, that's how long we've been around, you know, 9 years, probably younger than Helen Kuhn, no Diane's Road, I don't know. So when we started, we realized there was a gap where Black films or Black content created from Africa really didn't travel beyond the borders of the continent. Purely, of course, and the reason I say that because I was at the markets where buyers were buying content or where producers were selling content. The difficulty, if you've got a black product, to try and find a market for it globally at the time. Of course, things have changed now. So we started as a way to say, okay, cool, this is what we're going to do. We're going to try and get as many Black, and I want to be specific because that's what I really picked up. And those are the producers that I work with. Or even if the producer was not Black, but the content they were creating had black people on screen. So that was our first sort of into the market. We started finding these films or television series that we could find markets and platforms for globally. So us as AAA, we are, like I say, we are a boutique sales and distribution company. And I know Helen Kuhn went into detail in terms of what the difference is, where our focus was mainly stuff from the continent to the world. We didn't really play in what we call the local market because we didn't do theatrical releases. We didn't do any local distribution. We were exploiting whatever was available outside the continent, which worked for a certain period, of course, but it's changed over time because as Helen could, the streamers now are in the continent. So we've had to sort of restructure in terms of our model, that it was no longer about just the global rights outside Africa. We started incorporating anything that is locally. So the company itself, so we like Helen Kuhn, we've decided we develop, we produce, we find the market for whatever content we're creating. At the same time, we find the money. So we sort of finance. We're like a production, development, sales and distribution and financing company. Purely because things are a bit difficult. If you do one thing, it's almost doesn't really work. You know, we work like a mini studio, put it that way, where things come in on one side and they go out another side to the market, but they have all the elements together. Unlike Helen or Diane, we do not only movies, we cut across all content genres. So even criteria, we do film and television series, we do unscripted, scripted content, whether it be long form, short form. So we carry all the properties in the film and television value chain. So we're not necessarily specific to just film, but anything that is a great property that has a value for the market, and that's what we get involved. So coming to the fact whether there is opportunity for what we create, or there is a market and what the market is looking for, I think things have changed over the past 10 years, where especially in the past 5 years, put it that way. The past 5 years have had a massive change. we've always been focused, I guess, as a company on the genres that sell. You know, if you go globally, they tell you, what is it that work? There's 5 genres that work, because those ones, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white, action, romantic comedy, sci-fi, right? Horror. These were what's called popular genres. They didn't really matter which territory you come from, which country you came from. That was our focus. But of course, with the streamers now, per se, coming into the market, and the streamers becoming the biggest buyers still, right? As compared to, and you both know, to many other buyers before. There is, of course, a bit of, because they have what's called local domestic focused Africa. So they're explorative again in terms of other genres that they could look at. You know, before, if you created an art house film, it was always a difficult one, because you needed to have a festival strategy, you needed to be able to finance it differently. But now, of course, with everyone else looking for local content, there is what call room to, as long as the content resonate with the local audience, and it's a genre that appeal. It does maybe not as commercial as it used to be, but it has a certain appeal to the local market. Then there is a space for it. But again, like I said, it's still very difficult to make movies, right? I still don't know why we make movies, but it's still very difficult to make movies. It's difficult to finance them because the budgets aren't getting smaller, right? The budgets we're working with, they're becoming more and more expensive. Things are becoming, the quality demanded by everyone has to be high. But the financing in place, or what the market is willing to pay, still doesn't really align, you know, to how we're creating. I think there is opportunities for sure, but it still make it very difficult.
Right. Before I go to the next question, I just want to remind the audience that you are free to type your questions into whichever platform and arena you're watching from, and we will ask those questions to the panel a little bit later on. Dan, I want to come back to you and see if you can assist here. So I'm an ex-broadcaster, and I perfectly understand how windows used to work in terms of, you know, first window, second window, third window. I know the streamers have disrupted that a little bit, but I think most producers in South Africa don't have an understanding of exactly how that works. Could you assist us in understanding what is a first window, what is a second window, how does that work, and how should producers understand how they can license and sell according to those windows from a broadcast perspective?
Well, definitely, Thandi. I think that the main thing that you've just said is, what are the windows? Do they exist? How do they exist? And what works for work? I think as a filmmaker, you've got your content, you come to the distributor, and the job is to ascertain where this film is going and what its market is. Are we going to do the full run, the full package, cinema, VOD, TV, or pay TV, go through the motion, free TV, the whole 7-year, 10-year span, all of that we as distributors know full well, has just completely gone like this. So we literally, you've got to be able to understand as a filmmaker, and hence we have the distributors that are here to guide and help, although we also don't have magic crystal balls. But the most important thing that you need to do is, once you've made your piece of content, you need to understand who your market is, and you need to know before you even do one thing. Correct. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yes.
Before you can make the film, understand your audience.
Yes, please, and where it's going to go. You can't have a made-for-TV feature and expect, you know, your distributor's going to put it in 37 cinemas across the country. We need to understand that. The window period has completely shrunk. I mean, you can have something coming right out of the studio. You can, in fact, can still be in some certain cinemas and be playing on box office already. So those window periods, it is all about negotiation. It is not defined. It's not in black and white. It is all about the negotiation and how you do it. Box office for us as Gravel Road is a very big part of our pie that we have. We have got at least 30% of the box office titles belong to Gravel Road on that shelf. And then the Showmaxes, the Netflix, the normal linear kind of channels that also exist, SVOD channels that exist, become second stage, but it's not, you're not waiting 3 years between them, you're waiting sometimes 6 months. So it all depends on those negotiations, and it all depends on the lifespan of the film. I'm sure Maya and Zeka and Helen, having more experience, especially with the local content, we deal with a lot of the international content on the box, but from a local perspective, they will know definitely more.
And then, do you think windows have disappeared, or are you still working on that principle of cinema, VOD, first run pay TV, etc.? And do we still have holdbacks on content these days as we go onto platforms?
Yes, the windows are there. It depends on how you license or how you roll out a particular film. And yes, there are holdbacks. I guess to Diane's point, it always is about negotiation, because if you're going to go into a cinema, they require a window of exclusivity, obviously, because it's an expensive outing. You know, it's about going out, not just about seeing a particular film. And all the realities of being a retailer, which is what a cinema really is, paying the rent, paying their staff, the insurances, the stock, all of that is still there. They just have more flexibility around programming now, since everything is now digital. There are no cinemas left that don't have digital projection. So that playing films from servers, not having to play the same film 4 or 5 times a day, but for instance, playing kids' films on a particular screen during the day and then playing something that may be 16 or 18 age restricted on 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock shows, is all possible now and has happened. That's how the exhibitors are programming now. So it's not necessarily 5 or 6 screenings a day for 6 days a week like it was traditionally. So firstly, if you're going to go into cinema, there is a window of exclusivity. Again, if you're using it to launch something like an art house film, for instance, that needs a certain kind of showcase to qualify for particular awards like the Oscars or whatever, you may say you're going onto a limited number of screens and going onto box office quicker. So that window classically is 6 weeks between box office and cinema. So that holdback still is there. And then the holdback between starting pay TV, if we follow the traditional route from your box office live date, is 5 months minimum. It could be longer. It's all determined in the contract. And then it assumes that you're licensing onto these platforms exclusively. Just remember, with cinema, it's exclusively cinema, but that will always incorporate all the cinemas. It's not necessarily exclusive to New Metro or to Kinnico or at movies or whatever it may be. It's on all the cinemas. We just call it the cinema window. The same with the DSTV box office. You can license exclusively to them, or you can do TVOD at that time on a number of TVOD platforms if it's done non-exclusively. But then there's still a holdback until pay TV starts, and a television license, a broadcast license, because they pay significant fees, again, obviously it's going to require exclusivity for their period of time, which can be anything from 2 or 3 years to 6 years. But the very, very long licenses have fallen by the wayside over time, which is a good thing because it helps to get the titles onto the next broadcast platform. So you still can't be on pay TV and free TV at the same time because of the fee structures. With subscription VOD, the streamers, again, it depends on whether you're licensing exclusively or non-exclusively. You can be on a particular streamer that has an exclusive window period for a number of years, and then it may be able to go to free TV within that license, but not to another streamer. Or you could right from the start license non-exclusively across a number of streamers, which will probably also enable you to do TVOD at the same time. So the holdbacks are there. It depends on the strategy you work out for a particular film. Or I guess Zeka can speak more to the series, how that works on the series or that kind of long form programming side. But they are there, yes. You have to negotiate. There's certain hard and fast rules. Like, for instance, a streamer can buy out a pay TV window, then pay TV is not going to buy it because the pay TV terms would still apply. Streamer may call it a direct-to-service deal, but it basically buys out the pay TV window and the cinema ability. And then the festivals thing comes into it as well, because some of the streamers are comfortable with contemplating festivals. Other streamers are particularly focused on once it's on the platform, it's got to be there only and it can't do festivals. And then, of course, the territories come into it. So, you know, you can have a license to all these platforms in a particular territory, but not to other territories. So you can do festivals or X, Y, and Z in other territories. It remains very much a negotiation that's based on that piece of content or that slate of content. I guess when you deal with television series, sometimes it's a slate because you may have more than one series of a particular title. So it's a yes answer, holistically speaking, but it's still to be negotiated based on the strategy that you're following for a particular film.
So let's get into the long form, Mainzeke, and I want to ask you this question because I think a lot of producers don't understand how licensing fees work very specifically. So they've made a piece of content, it's a TV series, they've done it themselves, they've self-financed it. They're now wanting to go out and sell this particular piece of content. And I really remember this from buying at one point in time as a broadcaster, where I would get this horror from a producer because I was licensing and giving him a license fee, and he'd go, but it cost me more to make the film. And I would say to them, well, I'm not paying you for the cost of making the series or the film, I'm paying you for a window to exhibit this particular property. So the key thing is getting producers to understand what does a licensing fee look like? Why is it a certain amount? And why is it not the cost of making the entire show itself? I think there's very much, I understand, a confusion from producers who do think that, great, I've made this at 100,000 Rand per episode, and I want you to license it at 100,000 Rand per episode, so I can cover my costs. So the question is twofold. How do we get producers to understand how licensing fees work? And also, what should the expectation be around how much you are expecting to get for Africa rights, for global rights, for just South Africa, etc.?
Yeah. Again, I think that's a great, again, that's a very interesting question because, it's almost the same when, as a sales agent, someone says, why are you charging 20%, as a commission? Well, why don't you just take 2%?
And I'm coming to that. So people can understand that too.
So I think, firstly, because when it comes to movies, they have the luxury, of course, of windowing cinema, which doesn't really happen with long form. But when you create any piece of property, you create because you want to earn revenue from it, right? You want to generate revenue, put it that way. So there's a specific budget based on what it costs to create this property in order to have high-end, the right technical deliverables or the right quality. But also budgets are subject to what you can get from the market. Oftentimes, the reason like that is when producers go create a property, they create not knowing what the market is willing to pay. Now, right. When we talk about the market, we talk about the global market. If you are creating something for your domestic market, what I call your local market, then also you must know what it costs and what that market is willing for that type of content. And that's where sometimes the lack of understanding is. So here for a long time, of course, we're subjected to certain type of broadcasters, and they had a specific license fee for what is deemed something they fully own, right? So when it's something they fully own, which means they pay for the budget because they know what their market, what they can generate as a revenue from that specific content. So if you create a series and you're going to sell it to SABC or MultiChoice, for them to put it to give value to it, the value of what it costs is subject by the advertising revenue that comes or any other revenue that comes to the broadcaster. That creates the value for the property or how much they should be making each series. Now, when you independently create it, because you have to be able, you don't wanna be subjected to a commissioning or a fully IP owned by a broadcaster, you have to know what the market is willing to pay. Now, the Africa, let's say SABC or MultiChoice, they have, of course, standard set cost per minute in terms of how it costs for them to spend on a piece of property. And that, as I explained, that's based on the revenue generated and many other factors to it. they come to that value of what they're willing to pay. And you can negotiate in terms of what they can put in your piece of property that you've created based on the quality, the genres, the audience, the marketability, and the market that you're targeting. So that determines what they will pay for something you've created independently. They can never, if you created something independently and you still own the exploitation right, the IP, copyright, and it's not fully owned by the broker, you can never get 100% of what you've created because they only buy a certain window for a certain period. And that period means they can generate a certain number of revenue from your property within that window. And this is what they're willing to pay you. You still own it, which means you can exploit it beyond other territories, other market. Now, there's about 74 territories in the world where a piece of content can be exploited. And if you're creating something for 10 million rand, then you have to think in all these 272 territories, will I be able to get my money back? Am I creating the right property for all of them, right? Because you never really create the right project for the different territories. Also, how do I know what each territory is willing to pay? Now, what we do, of course, as sales agents, as Helen said, now it's becoming Blair or distributors, is that we do what's called market approval, or market, or let's say market approval, where we can go and get pre-sale, or also we can sort of understand what each market will pay based on previous experience. So where we say, okay, if you create this type of property, this genre, this quality, North America will pay this much. This is purely based on historical data. Then you know when you go and creating it from a specific territory, I'm going to generate this much revenue. And then from this territory, then you know if I'm creating, I can be able to sell these different territories and I'll be able to make my money back. But it's almost impossible for, unless again, you go to a territory or a platform. These days, what's happening is that because we no longer sell per territory like we used to before, right? The platforms globally have sort of taken, they've become the biggest buyers. When they acquire something now, the first price is they take a global deal. Now, if you created the right property and at the right budget, then you can almost sell it to a platform and be able, if they take all rights global deal, maybe you can retain most of your budget, depending how long the period of exploitation is. So it all depends. Like I said, it all depends on what each territory is willing to pay and what it means to that territory, the value of your property. And if you've created the right genre, the right property, or sorry, if I use the word property, not formative, because it's just, it's like money terms. If you created the right series or the movie for that territory, then they'll give you a value of your budget. But it's never, I mean, most times it's never the right budget. And sometimes you can get more than what you created, depending again on the platform and the territory and the exploitation, the genre you create. So it all varies depending on what you create.
Okay, Diane, you only distribute films. You don't do any long form, I'm assuming.
We have, well, predominantly we've been involved in film, but we now are also diversifying a little bit. We're getting a little bit involved in some series, some short form stuff as well, especially for, I mean, to be honest, there are so many platforms available that we just simply don't have enough content to be able to supply. So we don't just do long form, we do telecoms, we do a lot with MTN, Vodacom, Telkom, we do a lot there. And like I said, we do a lot of feature film, and then we are now going into a bit of series, especially in the children area, the younger TV series type thing for kids.
Okay, and going into long form, when you are wanting to produce a series, at what point do you think, well, both film and long form, should a producer be approaching a distributor? When do you think is the prime time to be coming to you or to Helen or to Mayanzeki and saying, guys, this is my idea? Or do I come when I've got everything in the can? At what point in time do you approach a distributor in terms of the life cycle of producing your content?
Thandi, I think you said it earlier. before you've even started thinking about what you're going to do. No, I think we definitely, it's what COVID has been able to do for us is just actually bring the world onto your doorstep. We can have these sorts of conversations. We can understand the sooner, let me put it like this, the more inexperienced you are in the industry, the sooner you should approach a distributor, especially, again, when I say the biggest things are to be able to understand your market, where you're going to start and where you see it going into the future. How long is your piece of string, really, which is ultimately your content? How long is it got for you and how much are you going to make out of it? And is it going to sustain you to be able to create some more? Or are you just going to do a once-off, whatever you're doing? I spend, I would say, at least 60% of my weeks, 70% of my weeks talking to new filmmakers, content providers, content creators. That's how soon they're getting. They're coming to us, they pitch an idea, they say this, what do you think about this? What do you think about doing this on streaming? What do you think about this on broadcast? Can we take something like this to cinema? It's as soon as that, really. You come up with the idea, talk to your distributor because they know the market better than anybody.
Just Thandi, maybe just again to quantify for me in terms of why, because it's two ways, right? Experienced producers oftentimes says, I know my market, I know my audience, so I'm going to go create something independently, or they already have a relationship maybe with a producer. In like up and coming filmmakers, inexperienced, they don't have access, but also they might just decide they want to create. Now, the reason you want to come to a sales agent, right, or a distributor is because you can create something knowing at least what value you're going to generate, right? There is my daily work, I interact with broadcasters in the market. That's what I do on a daily basis, right? And because I'm selling back and I get feedback. So because of that, I know what genres they're looking for. I know what they're short of. I know how much budget they have, what they're willing to pay. Mm. Now, if you come to me early on, I can give you that piece of information that allows you, when you go create, you know what I'm creating, where it's going to go, and how much I may potentially make. Of course, you could go and create something if you experience, and it might come back, it might be great. And you might create something that you want to do, but the chances of success of you really making it your money back, if you start with a distributor or sales agent, are much higher as compared if you go on your own, right? That's the deal, so that people don't feel like I have to go to the distributor. Oh, Thandi said there in that conversation, you must go to the distributor. Now, when I call my Nzega, he doesn't pick up my call. So which means I'm never gonna make something. So all it is just to make you aware. If you can't get on me on the call and you want to go make something, just so you know that the chances are of you making your money back, if I can give that piece of advice, are higher. It is not, of course, never guaranteed, but because of my daily engagement with the platform and the buyer and the market. So that's kind of the, to sort of quantify that, that question.
And the value that you bring. Yeah. So let's just talk about that in terms of value that you bring as a distributor. You're saying to producers, look, I am, especially if you're looking at long form, I'm much more aware of what the appetite is, what the audience is for a particular streamer or for a particular broadcaster. I understand that these are the genres they're looking for. I understand there's no appetite for a costume drama because they're hell of it expensive. And there's absolutely no way. So your big idea about a wooden ship, wrecking on the coast of Cape Town in 1652 is not going to sell because it's not going to sell. So that's kind of the value that you bring. And I know that a lot of people will go, okay, right, they're selling back. Why are their fees 20% or 25% or 15%? What are they actually doing for this? So explain a little bit to our audience why there's a need, exactly what you're doing. I think I've gone through some of it, but why is it you take that commission and that fee in terms of doing so? Because I think a lot of people are like, well, he's going to take me to Netflix. I can just get in there myself. Why must I pay him 20% to take me to Netflix, and I'll try and get there myself?
Yeah, I'll leave that for Helen. I think people like Helen more than
I'll send it back to Helen.
So I think was that question posed to me or to Helen? Just so I know.
It was supposed to. Let Helen take it. That's
Okay, cool. Let Helen start because she's always kinder than me. So let's put it that way.
I think, first port of call is you're free to take it to Netflix directly. No one is forcing anyone to work with a distributor, of course. It's still ultimately your decision as a producer. Normally what happens is if you do that once, or a couple of times maybe, is distribution is not a glamorous line of work. A lot of what we do is really manual and really quality checking and really fixing things that can be fixed, but has run out of budget. So, there's no M&E tracks, there's no E&O insurance, there's no masters that are clean with, closed caption subtitles, or the music cue sheet is incorrect, or some music wasn't cleared, or all these things are everyday challenges. So, of course, go to Netflix or go to MultiChoice, or all these platforms have channels that you can approach them directly. The first thing that a distributor brings is that view of the landscape. So a sense of the pricing, because you may go to Netflix or you may go to whoever. Let's use Netflix as an example because they are the most active streamer at the moment in our territory. And they offer you whatever, $10,000 for an episode of something or a documentary or whatever. You may go into shock or you may be delirious because there's no context when you receive that offer. If you have a distributor on board, we can give that context because we understand the range of payments. Obviously, these things are confidential as well. You will see when you sign with anybody, your NDAs are, significant documents. So it's important to have an understanding of the landscape, which goes to both Manzek and Diane's points. Don't assume a streamer is going to pay you your cost plus 30%, like you read in the American media. I've not seen that happen yet. I don't know if you have, Manzek, for any of these deals at all yet. So that seems to be an assumption that people have picked up from international media that may have happened with, big star studded vehicles in the rest of the world, but it hasn't happened with African content yet. So you need to be very clear on what can and can't be done. That's the one part. The other part is there's always marketing involved, whether it is, and yes, of course, social media is a revolution, but nobody can prove to this day what the conversion is from a number of posts or likes on social media or a Twitter furore or sense of delirium or, a TikTok campaign, because these things are super cheap. They're super cost effective. How that actually translates to sales. What we can track information and research wise is that it seems to be about on the high end 2 to 3% and on the low end 0.3%. So if you've got 100,000 likes, you can probably assume you're going to get 30 people actually bothering to watch. And I'm saying bothering to watch because as much as you may be excited about something, you still have to set the time aside to do it. And we're already in a consumer fatigue environment where the amount of content coming at people from all the streamers, the broadcasters in cinema, is just an insane amount of content. You've got platforms sitting with 4,500 to 5,500 titles on the platform at any given point in time. And that is the pile of competition you are up against. So this is a double-edged sword. As much as there's all these new opportunities to sell and to find viewers, by the same token, the competition has just been flatlined. You're right in the thick of it now. You did not compete with 5,500 titles previously. When you were on a platform where you were in a cinema, you were competing with, in a cinema environment, between 42 and 48 titles at a given point in time. And broadcast, I think everybody's very familiar with broadcast, but a streamer or any kind of platform that is I watch when I want to watch, that's where you are. That's the landscape all of a sudden. So firstly, that's the second thing to consider. And the third thing to consider is, honestly, if making a film or distributing a film was that easy, considering the amount of work it takes on both sides, then everybody would be doing it right all over the world, and they would have been doing it for decades and decades and decades already. It's a team sport, this industry, just like any other. The amount
Collaboration
of
is
work,
key.
yeah, collaboration is completely key, because you also need to get on with making the next piece of content.
Yeah.
So the work to get it out, to get it delivered, to close the deals, to go up and down with the contracts, to, you know, not fall into the pitfalls, to deal with the queries, which, by the way, go on for years. I mean, we have titles that we represent that's still being licensed out. The oldest one is 17 years old. So if you're prepared to deal with that title for 17 years yourself, of course, you know, that's as much as our big challenge as distributor and sales agent at the moment is there's just not enough content. There isn't enough. So there's more demand than there is supply at the moment. So, you know, our job in the value chain is to get the content to audiences and to do it in a realistic fashion and not overspend, that you can in fact get to a point in time. Because it's the other thing, if you have a Netflix offer, an Amazon or a broadcast offer, that's that, right? Often people don't think about, what if I follow this strategy or that strategy or that strategy, or what's changing? You know, should it be exclusive or non-exclusive? You know, we don't have enough distributors either.
That's true.
There's so much room for growth here for all of us, but it's no, I'm always saying there must be more of us, you know, but there must be more of the producers. We need more content.
I don't think the audience, I can see all of you, the audience can't, and
Yeah.
going, no, there mustn't be more of us. The three of us.
No, there should be. You know, I think, you know, to what Helen said, there should be more of us, right, in order to make it work. But the market will also have to grow with the numbers of us, right? Because let's say some of the biggest successful territories and markets is driven by distribution. It's and you know, you think the big 5 studios are production companies, they're not. You know, they're distributors, right? At the core of everything. So for me, you know, to what Helen again to add is, I've gone to the point where I said, if you want to have a conversation with me about your property, here's my agreement. This is what I take. Before I even talk to you, so that you have an understanding.
Right.
Because, you know, when I take an agreement between myself and the broadcaster, it comes from the broadcaster's legal department, which means it's a legal contract. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so which means I need to get a lawyer to look at the agreement. Now, producers, the market, they always think, no, just read it and send back and sign. That's why we have issues, right? Because when they do the deals, they forget there's lots of other parties that the distributor does. It's not just the fact that you give me a product, I just drop it with Netflix and then everything works. You know, there is a lot, from how he gets paid, from the administrative fees that I have to incur, to the fact that, you know, I was saying to someone, some experienced producers, I'm creating a project that I want the global market to see. So I said, what is the global market? They're like, everyone. So I said, you know, there's French-speaking market, there's Portuguese-speaking market, there's Spanish, then there's English, right? And then there's, of course, Cantonese and Mandarin. Now, they make up a big part of the global market. But your project that you create has got no M&Es, nor E&O insurance. Now, how do you expect to sell to a global market? They're like, what is that? So I'm like, okay, if you want to do it yourself, then go ahead at your 2%, whoever you want to work with. But if you want me to be able to give it, because I'm telling you all the work that I have to do, it's not because people don't understand what it takes to negotiate, to create, to work, all the dirty work that distributors or sales agents have to do. They're not so nice work, right? People don't understand. So I guess there's an education that needs to happen. But hence, it justifies the commission we take. And people globally, there's almost, I think we probably charge the lowest commission, just really in South Africa, to be honest. Like what we charge is probably the worst. Try and give your project to or some of our competitors will probably based in LA or in the UK, and then you'll see the difference, right? But all I'm saying, I think the work and the value we bring into properties is almost invaluable.
Yeah.
But of course, everyone has a chance to be able to decide themselves, I want to go direct to the platform. But also at the same time, you know, in the olden days when I started as an aggregator, right? So what an aggregator does then was, it's difficult for a broadcaster or a platform to be dealing with 20 filmmakers and drafting 20 contracts. So they're like, okay, we want you to aggregate because we can deal with you. You do all the dirty work, fighting back and forth, what the value is, but this is what we do. But also, so as much as it is, of course, great for the producer, but it's great for the platform. So it's easier for the platform to deal because they can bring in volumes, you know.
Yeah. Diane, you wanted to weigh in on this?
I also just a very quick and short point was your distributor is not just taking that 30% or whatever it is commission. Your distributor's in there with you, taking the same kind of risk that you're taking. That film flops, you'll flop. You know, that opening weekend where you hold your breath and you're waiting for those Friday figures to come through first thing on Saturday morning. I mean, I can speak for my Nzeka and Helen. We've all sat there and you look at those figures and you go, fantastic, this is wonderful, we've got over that hump, or you feel like you've literally been punched in the gut because the film didn't respond the way you'd hoped and you've put in 2 million rands marketing or whatever you've done. Your distributor's right there beside you, taking as much risk as you're taking. And that's why, you know, like everybody says, that 20 or 30% is really, that's your partner throughout the story of your film. And you've got to also remember that the risk is as much ours as it is the filmmakers.
Right. So a question I want to ask, and this comes with an anecdote I want to give you. When I was buying content for the channels I was running at that point in time, I remember arriving at MIP TV and having set up a number of meetings with distributors, and I got to the table, and because automatically I was from Africa, they had, you know, pulled together content that they thought Africans would like. And I sat down at this meeting and this woman said, well, I'm taking out my museum and I'm going to show you my urban catalog. I was completely confused, okay? I was like, no, I'm not looking for content about buildings, okay? I'm looking for content about people that I'm going to show to people in Africa. At which point in time I then learned that urban meant black, which was a real big shock for me. I was like, urban really means a city and then rural means a, you know, but this is in America, how they term a black audience is an urban audience. I find it bizarre. But when we're going out, we're selling African content, and as my Nzeki says, with black faces and stories that resonate from an African perspective, how do you as a distribution agent go out and sell that? Do you say this is my urban catalog? Do you say it's my African catalog? Do you say it's my comedy catalog? I mean, how do you go out and position the content coming from here out into the global market? Let's start with you, Dai.
Looking at me, right? So,
no, I just asked Dai to weigh in, my Nzeki first, and then we'll come to you.
Definitely. I mean, Ben is hopefully on an aeroplane and coming back from Cannes as we speak. But it's definitely, and the African continent is so fantastic right now. It's just flourishing. I mean, we're selling to airlines, we're selling to everywhere, and it's for Africa, from Africa. It's super exciting. But it really isn't about black faces, and it's about genres. It's about what are you looking for, and have we got it? Have we got it in our catalog, and can we give it to you? I mean, we've got so many titles sitting in the horror thriller genre that suddenly seems to have a big upswing, just suddenly that's happening. The more rom-com things that we have are kind of petering out a little bit. So the industry also constantly is changing, and the appetites seem to shift every now and again. But we definitely don't. We sell by genre. We do as Gravel. What are you looking for, and have we got it?
Okay, and you mind, Zeki? I mean, and I'm asking this. Look, this was, you know, over a decade ago, and that was the way content that, and then there's been a major shift in terms of our presence on screen, generally. But are you finding that it's more genre driven now, or is this still a boxed in thing that says, oh, I'm buying content for Africa and I'm specifically buying for an African American market, or I'm specifically buying for a Brazilian market because people look the same?
Listen, I think the discrimination is still out there. We can't, let's not kid ourselves, right? I think we try to fantasize and think things have changed, you know? So traditionally, the programmers, right, or the buyers were white men. Now, and that's what's happened globally. It's still the biggest thing, right? Those are the biggest buyers. and the programmers for these big channels. So it's not in there. They don't understand the culture, right? They don't understand. So hence they coined it urban, you know, in North America. So when they decided to become urban means black, right? Yeah. And because it's the urban areas they come from, right? So then the programmers or the decision makers were still very white male. So they didn't understand the culture, but they knew, you know, it's like a brand selling a product to the rural areas. They don't eat the pilchard they sell, but they know they have to sell it to them because it's what the stable meal that they do. If I put it that way, like it's like when you're selling meal to the rural areas, the guy selling it doesn't even eat it, but he knows that there's a market for it. So that's what has happened to content, right? North America started like that. But what has happened is because, of course, as the growth of the African American market and that become more lucrative and the screen becoming more and more vocal, it shifted, and the brands associating with what is black is good. It shifted how they look at black content, right? And we know how that has happened over the past 10 years. So if you came from Africa, firstly, it's the continent you come from. There's a and I had this conversation at the American film market, right? There's a preconceived idea of what stories should come from that territory, purely because of just where we come from. They should be like this. And that they're not the same, right, as African American. They're similar, but they're not the same. Americans by nature, they don't like to read subtitles. They're just lazy, right? Subtitles is something that they don't want to do. Now, one of our biggest disadvantage when you sell to those channels, because the stuff we created was in our mother tongue, right, or different languages, and we're selling it to a market that doesn't really even read subtitles. So there's already a prejudice, which from the fact that, oh, it's foreign subtitle. And it was not just only to Africa, it was to Asia, it was to many other foreign markets that were subtitled or in their local language creation. So that was the context of where we come from. Of course, with the streamers coming in, they sort of disrupted that whole notion that a content from Africa worked very well in
Korea,
Poland or Korea, right? Because, but now what those analytics does to other brands because of competition, they're like, there's something there that maybe we didn't see.
Yeah.
At the same time, the programmers, because of how North America grew, the programmers and the decision makers changed the color of their skin. At the same time, the sellers of content that came from here didn't really look like me, right? You found people who don't look like me. They don't even understand what they're selling. I mean, still something that happens now. You ask, I was at the market, the guy comes with a catalog of black titles, but the guy is white. So I asked him, what is the story? He doesn't know what the story is, but he knows that this will work for Africa. This is great because it's got black people. I'm like, but like tell me why the motivation for you to sell this content, right? Because that's what we do as sales agent. It's like, yeah, it's great. It's romance. I think it will work for your people. So there's still a lot of that, right? There's still a lot of that happens. So, but the streamers have come in, have really shifted how the content is being presented. And also foreign language films have also gone to the point of winning Oscars, which is what North America has deemed prestigious. Right. So that shift, and also just globally, the brands, the market is looking for diverse content. They're tired of seeing the same people on screen. Diversity is like the new thing. So that sort of helped. So no one really, now I don't have to say it's from Africa. Now I can say, look, this is a great content. It's black and it speaks to your diverse needs, but it's high quality, it's great stories. So that way I have, let's say BET Plus, still very right, BET Plus or Aspire or all of them, they are looking for black diverse content. So that way now you can sell it regardless of genre, as long as at least it meets the quality, the story, and it works. So I think that's the shift. The streamers have sort of shifted, but again, it's still, I can tell you, selling content, there's still slight bit of prejudice. Hence, it's better for us to sell to the streamers than to sell to direct network, the different territories or linear channel, because there's still those restrictions. The decision makers still don't understand. For streamers, they've sort of disrupted it.
Right.
They have no prejudice. They just take whatever is great stories.
Great. I'm gonna come to you, Helen, soon, but I want to start with you, Di, and I want to talk a little bit about marketing. Okay, so I look at a lot of film budgets, and the one thing I never see on that budget is a marketing budget. I try and explain to a lot of producers, because when I used to buy project properties for my TV channels, they'd be delivered with absolutely no assets. Okay, absolutely no assets, and trying to get producers to understand that your marketing doesn't start when you've made the film and you're in post-production. It starts where does it start? Please explain to our producers, where does marketing start? When does it start? And when should a producer be thinking about marketing, please, Diane?
Wow. So marketing is the definitely, I mean, when the film succeeds, what a fantastic marketing campaign. They did everything. We saw it everywhere, billboards, TVs, everything. Film fails, terrible marketing job. That's the general rule. That's how it works. No, I think marketing has in fact become easier, and it should be something that is primarily your biggest function. You are trying to stand out, like Helen said earlier, amongst a whole lot of noise. You've got to bring your title, your concept, your series, whatever it is, your feature film, and you've got to push it through all that mess and say, this is my film, this is what we're doing, how do we do it? Thank God for social media, although me personally, I hate it. But social media is just something that allows us to tap in, we can adapt quickly, we can also try to, like Helen also said earlier, you can have 100,000 likes or engagements and only 30 people come to cinema. It's you can't necessarily, but you have to be there. You can't just avoid it. And you have to be wherever people are consuming things, looking. I mean, I'm sitting at home, I'm watching The Block on TV because it's my favorite thing at the moment. And I'm on my phone, I'm looking at my Facebook, I'm looking at my LinkedIn, I'm texting somebody. That's how the world is working right now. And you need to be everywhere that's happening. And I think that the other thing, and the biggest thing that I've experienced, is how clever our streaming guys are. I have often been where I'm sitting and I'll look at something and I have watched it 3 months ago, and suddenly they've just changed that little thumbnail. And it looks like a different poster. And I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And I click onto it and I'll see it and I go, oh, hang on, but I've seen this 2 months ago. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep refreshing. You've got to be on the platform for, if it's a streaming platform, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. You've got to keep fresh. You've got to keep moving stuff. The amount of times I've sat in, especially with overseas filmmakers and content suppliers, and said, how many poster options have you got for us? They can either say one, or then I say, please send me all your poster options so that I can pick, or I want all of them, so that we can keep changing things. We've got to keep things fresh. We've got to keep in people's faces. And you can't, back in the day, when I'm talking 35mm film day, you just had 1 or 2 poster options. You were on there, it looked the same, it felt the same. Now you've got to just shape things up, and you need to start your marketing plan before you even do the first shot on set. You need to know what you're going to do.
I think that's important advice in this digital age. I mean, I looked at Senzo and the number of poster options. I think there were 20 different poster options that were in use on the platform and still in use on the platform. And that was kind of, oh, wow, this is the digital world. This is the way we do it. There's not just one poster. But I want to come back to talking about when you start marketing, because the thing that I think a lot of producers don't understand is you have to have a photographer on set. You need to be shooting whilst you are shooting, if I could put it that way, and not, because when I was a broadcaster, when I want those materials, I also want behind the scenes. I want to see people with booms and everything there, because people love seeing the back end of things. Also, for me, I remember very clearly when I was consulting to producers, and I said, oh, what are your acting contracts looking like? And have you written into your contracts that once the shoot is over, these people have to do marketing, and what kind of marketing do they have to do? You have to write that into contract now. You can't make the film and then go back to them and say, please, will you do the PR? These are things you've got to think about up front from a marketing perspective. Do you find, Helen, do you find that your producers
I just want to say one more thing. Sorry, Thandi, just one more thing, and because you raise a very valid point. In this digital age, our cast members and behind the scenes as well are in fact, like you say, we need to write them into that script. I cannot tell you how many times we'll come into releasing a film and you've got cast members saying, okay, well, I've got a 2.5 million base following. How much are you going to pay me? Because I'm essentially an influencer. And then you say, but hang on, we're promoting your film. We're creating your success, and you want me to pay you above and extra because you're an influencer. You've got 2.5 million people. So those things have also just shifted completely, and it becomes a whole new negotiation.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about festival and festival runs. I mean, do you think they're important? Do you think they're important for specific genre films? Why should producers be looking at festival runs, or should they be looking at festival runs? Should they be bothering in terms of festival runs?
Thandi, I just want to add something to the marketing
Sure.
thing quickly, and then I'll go on to festivals. The thing that about marketing and thinking about marketing right up front is absolutely very valid, but just something to consider there. If it's random, to keep on feeding random photographs that you took on set onto your Facebook page or your Twitter or whatever, that's not actually your finalized materials, may very well end up doing you harm, more harm than good. Because you must remember, once a consumer or a viewer or a liker or a Twitterer or a TikToker looked at the first piece of content they interacted with of that project or of that property, that basically has a yes, I'm going to look out for the next piece of content. Great. If they said, no, this looks crappy, when the next piece of content comes, even if it's better, they've lost interest. So as much as it needs to be out there, it's particularly important that it is finalized, that it's graded images, that it's a title treatment that doesn't look like somebody slapped it together in PowerPoint quickly at the end of the day, exhausted after having watched rushes.
Right.
If you do that, you're doing yourself more harm than good. The first clip you upload, when you Google a film later on, because remember, once it's up on the internet, it's there, right, forever, unless you go and delete it, which people forget to do, because a year from now, you're probably going to have completely forgotten what you posted while you were, shooting this month. And it's probably, 6 months or a year from that point in time that the film will be available for someone to view. You Google it later on and you uploaded a clip that doesn't have proper credits on, where the sound is all over the place. You haven't done ADR on that clip. It's just messy. You are creating the perception with whoever is interacting with that clip that this is going to be, free content that will be available on wherever, YouTube, to watch for free at some point in time, because it's very hard to get people to pay money to interact with that level of quality. And that speaks to what Manzeke was saying as well. The quality is critically important, and your quality control of what goes into the public domain around your marketing plan is important, because remember, as you say, people will only know about it when you start telling them about it. So just be wary of telling them about something, and the way that you're telling them actually creates a perception that it's not going to be that great. Because then you've got, the job is 10 times harder then to bring them back when you have the clip or the image or whatever that is super great. So because you've got that control, actually, because it is all digital, but remember, it works against you if you don't control it and it sits there. And 6 months from now, people start seeing things about, let's use Sensor as an example, and then they start Googling it. If there was some trailer up there that got 300,000 views at that time, that's the first thing that comes up in the search. Everybody by default clicks the first thing that comes up in the search, not the one that's 10 a page down because it was just launched and it's still looking for its views. So I just wanted to raise that as much as
that's good advice. Very good advice.
For you, just keep a grip on it, control it. So it's the thing with festivals is, yes, absolutely, there is value in festivals without a doubt, and it in itself is a circuit. There's more than, the last time I checked, there were more than 4,700 festivals around the world. So it's a specialist arena again. We work a lot with Film Festival Doctor in that regard, but then I'm sure there's other people that do that as well. Because as much as we may know a particular market, a festival agent and knows the festival world, which is its own world of exhibition, right? Which is physical and virtual, obviously. So you've got your big five, Cannes, Berlin, Toronto, Venice. What am I missing? Sundance. So that's for launching a particular kind of property or film, because it's at that quality level, or let's say it's a Berlin or a Cannes selection. It's super experimental. If you look at all the feedback from Cannes this year online, all sorts of super experimental films that made people either run out of the cinema, even the buyers, or stand and clap for 7 minutes were there on, even from, good old reliable directors like David Cronenberg. So that's a very particular kind of festival. And I think if you want to be there, you want to be in competition. If you're not on Directors Fortnight or the particular competition, that's why you showcase there, because it's a very particular kind of art house film, which has a certain course that it can travel. Outside of that, there's all these other festivals that are genre driven. There's for comedy, there's for African content in particular, there's for Black content that is always, then there's what they call a dark comedy, which may be the satire type films. There's family, there's animation. It's a whole world. So to earn laurels, you have to first and foremostly think, why do you want them? Have you got the kind of film that wants to win audience prizes, and that's going to start making buyers pay attention, or even make the viewer pay attention when they see the materials up on a platform later on to choose that? Are you showcasing, because there's various digital systems where you can, and everybody uses Film Freeway, I'm sure, but even Film Freeway, it doesn't help to just go and plug into your film into 70 different festivals, which also costs money, hoping for the best. That in itself needs to be a strategy that's worked out against a particular timeline, because the festivals obviously happen annually. So your festival run will be at least a year. And does that bring value to a sales price or not? Because for some genres, even if you take a mainstream genre like horror, there are particular festivals for that. The SFX ones, and there's in every key genre, there's the big five. So you either get into the big five, because that's where everybody looks first and foremostly, or you decide it's about launching a career, or it's about exposing a different kind of narrative. Is it going to bring value to the sales price? Is it not going to sell at all if we don't have some laurels? So it's somewhat of back to one of the previous answers, and I'm talking films, right? Because television and series also have now got their own festivals and markets that TV has always had that. But if you look at Series Mania and these things are now popping up, which, Manzeki can certainly speak to that. I see the names, but I have to look it up because it's not our port of call, which has its own world of festivals, laurels, awards attached. I mean, there's the Emmys. So it's just a very big world of a lot of information, and to just go spray and pray, let me add it up on Film Freeway and into 20 festivals, which is going to cost you anything from, $3 to 25 euros or whatever. Some are more expensive just to be in the running. It needs to be well thought through. But depending on the property and the strategy of the property, absolutely there's value in festivals. I mean, we've got new material, for instance, at the moment, doing really, really well on the comedy festival circuit. Joey Rasdin just won an award yesterday again. So, but that's completely different from the world of Cannes or the world of Berlin, or an Africa focus that has various themes that it would like to address in a particular festival, or the family kids. There's kids festivals, because we have so little kids content. When you have something, you want to be there. Kings of Mulberry Street has been playing festivals for the last 3 years. It just doesn't stop. Kids festivals love that film, and it can become a source of revenue over time. All of them are not free, and sometimes you can win money. So it's a yes answer, but think it through. Just like the marketing answer is a yes answer, but think it through.
Great. I'm going to turn to some questions that I'm getting from our audience out there. This is from Snethrun, who sent through a stream of questions. So I'll put them out to the panel. Any advice very specifically in terms of distribution and making money off short films? Is there a way to make money off short films? How do you distribute short films? Mainzeki, let me start with you. Do you guys have short films on your slate?
Yeah. Firstly, like short films aren't supposed to be a money-making property. You know, short films are about your craft. Basically, it's for any new upcoming or even someone who wants to start to create something where there is their voice. So short films are basically made for that. It's a talent-driven tool, right? Of course, having said that, when some short films, we've sold them to many platforms, and there's always constant demand for short films, but they're not going to yield the value you're looking for. You don't make a short film to make money. If that's the case, it's not the right thing to do. Forget it, right? So, but yes, we can sell. Almost everyone is looking for great short films, and is sometimes, especially the streamers, they want to look at this, or even some markets when they want to try something new or something different, short films, or they're looking for talent. That's where they go for, but not as a money-making exercise.
Okay. He wants to know, are your companies able to get us a deal with a streaming service, with streaming services such as Netflix, depending on concept alone? So do I just go to them with a concept, or do we need to self-fund and approach them after we've actually developed the content? I'm sure this is about series, so let's either have Dai or Mainzeki answer that question.
Mainzeki, you can go for it.
So basically, of course,
you've prepared this answer because I've heard you tell it to me about 1,000 times.
No, I think when you want to make any piece of property, right? You want any platform, whether a streamer, and you go and pitch to them your concept. There's certain criteria and certain things that they look for, depending what you're looking for from them. So if you have a great concept that a streamer or a pay TV or linear channel is looking for, and they think you have to follow their process of submission and pitching, right? We, as distributors, of course, we have specific relationship. We know is what they're looking for. And the process is not sometimes as easy as people try to make it. It always depends on the demand of the concept. Yes, of course, distributors can help you facilitate, you know, where you can somehow get like whether in a co-production form or in a pre-sale form, but there's certain things you have to do. You know, people say sell as a concept. Like no one really sells a concept, right? There's a concept is not just because you wrote 5 lines. There's certain things, packaging that you have to do in order for it to work, but also based on you. If you're not going to go sell a massive series if you've got no experience or you've never done, right? And you go by yourself. So if you say I've got this great concept and I've never made a series before, can you take to the stream? It's almost impossible. I can tell you it's not going to happen. So I think it's, yes, distributors or sales companies can facilitate as many deals with the streamers or linear channels, depending on the platform, depending on the project, the concept, the team behind it, and what's available.
Great.
And I also just want to add to that, sorry, Thandi, if I can quickly. You know, I've noticed a lot, and Gravel Road has been around for 10 years, and we're trying to give back. So we've put out a pitching competition, and we're doing a whole bunch of stuff to try and help in the development of this industry. And you know what shocked me the most is the level of aptitude and willingness that some of the filmmakers, I mean, we're asking for a script and you get a 2-page synopsis or something like that. So if you're thinking about doing anything and wanting to send it to the streamers, you want to stand out. Your concept needs to stand out, your title needs to stand out from the millions and millions of other things that the streamers are looking at. So put as much effort into it as you can, give as much information, try and make it as visually stimulating as you can, because we can do that. If you want your things to step out and stand out with the streamers, create it, make it stand out.
And not just that, can I just add to that is, you know, we're all having this discussion today because of the NFVF, and I think that's important because there's the way that the NFVF actually looks at the funding structure and the policies around that and who qualifies for what kind of funding is we are all in the same value chain. If you are at the point of your career where what you have is a two-pager, and you know you may have worked in television or whatever, you may have been a first AD or something, now you'd like to direct, or you know, you may have been on a story writing team and now you'd like to write your own short film. Since short films don't make money, you know, since pitches and pilot episodes for series, it's a whole other world. This infrastructure exists. The NFVF has that. They have a cycle every 3 or 6 months in whatever segment where that kind of pitch that Diane is referring to, if your pitch is 2 pages and a few visuals, and that's where you're at and you need the guidance and the training, then you're still at the point where you need training before, you know, we're going to be pitching to streamers. It's just because you don't want to set people up, any creative up, and we don't want to do that to any of ourselves, to fail, right? You don't want to have to go into a pitch with something that is not at the level, because pitching in itself is super nerve-wracking. So to have the actual documents and what ready, and what I've seen in my experience of pitches are the most successful ones, are the ones where there's more than one person pitching. You know, you may have a writer director with a producer, with a development person, or you may have, you know, 2 producers with an actor. It can be variety of permutations, but those are the most successful ones. I'm not talking about, you know, the 5-minute speed dating scenario thing where you get to meet with 20 people in 2 hours and you have 5 minutes to quickly run through your project. You know, an allocated pitch slot where you actually have to pitch on Zoom with your materials or in real life. So that is what a pitch is. It's just, so it's training. And I just want to remind everyone that that training and access to such funding for short films and that kind of training, before we're sending 20 pitches through to Netflix and they're kicking 19 back to us saying, don't waste my time. Because that's what they do to us, right? I'm not being difficult. They rely on the distributors around the world, all these companies, to know their own market, to know the talent in their own market. Because you can imagine how complex it is to work with Africa, for instance, because you're sitting with, you know, 54 countries with countless languages, very different and diverse cultural and legal setups from country to country, different audiovisual tastes from audiences. It's very difficult to find content that works at a certain level on our continent, across the continent. So now they're coming into this continent and, you know, you're dealing with the key markets at the moment, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. And the tastes from these audiences in these only three of the 54 countries, it's just completely different. There's not a hell of a lot that crosses over between all of us. It's a long, great opportunity for lots more content, but just bear that in mind, where we all fit in. And that we have National Film and Video Foundation, we have distribution, we have producers, we have writers. If you're at that stage of pitching, sometimes I think if you can't get a producer with some experience to be interested in your project in any way, shape, or form, think about it. Because the first person, if you're a creative that's writing, let's say I had an idea and I'm putting something together, you're not going to walk that path if you don't have a producer, probably more than one. Because producers with experience also know that everybody would be having heart attacks if there's not more than one producer on a project. You probably need 2 or 3. And then I'm talking about projects that go all the way, right? They go into development, they get made, whether they are straight to a platform or a cinema, or they've got rebates, or, you know, where you're using the tools of the trade that exists here. So it's just important for all of us to understand, like we all started, you know, with, you know, I packed boxes when I started working in distribution. That was how I started. I unpacked boxes for 2 weeks. I couldn't even type. I had to, at night, secretly pretend to type letters and whatever. So, we all work our way through gaining our experience to where we get to. That's a universal reality. It remains a reality. Whether we're talking digital era, film era, some of the most famous directors were runners on sets when they started. So it's just important to, again, it's a team sport. If you want to go at it alone, of course you're welcome to, but it's unlikely to yield the results you hope.
Great. He then asks, can pre-sales deals be made during pre-production? Yes, they can. Are your companies able to provide such a service? And when I'm trying to sell, does it make a difference if I'm a first-time feature film director? Mainzeki.
No, to answer a different question. No, of course, listen, experience counts. It doesn't matter which industry you're in. You're not, as a first-time farmer, you're going to sell to Woolies. You've never really grow anything, no veggies in your life, but you want to sell potatoes to Woolies. It's not going to happen, So all I'm saying is, it's experience count, right? And Helen has just said it. If the good thing about South Africa, right? Unlike other African countries, anyway, there's just so much access to development and production money. Now, people can argue and say, no, it's too small because we're just very entitled. We want so much more, right? But I think there's options. There's short form fund. There's things you could do, like you could apply to sort of help you hone your craft to be able to be better to get to the next movie without it being market facing. So I do think, of course, that there's a massive difference. If it's the first time, it's always going to be harder. You always have to prove yourself. So yeah, of course, do speak to Helen and Diane, right? From an early on perspective, but I do think it's not as easy. I'm like I said, my business is very market focused, right? And I come from a school. There's a gentleman once said to me, the problem about South Africa, because there's so much money invested in production and development, the filmmakers tend to create things for the government, right? Like whatever they make is very non-commercial. Of course, things are changing, but because a lot of money is being like that, I just personally, you come to me, I need to know that I'm going to earn a revenue from this thing. If I see it and I can see that there isn't any potential, I hardly get involved. I do, of course, will give my time to first-time filmmakers, giving a bit of my time, but most of the people I work with is people who created great stuff, and I can see and I can help them work. First time, I'm always going to give you my time to in terms of advice where to go, but I hardly pick up any project from first-time filmmakers. It never worked.
But we do, and just for
Helen, of course.
The thing is, even if you're a first-time director or writer-director, it's the same story for me. Storyscope, for instance, and Uruku, for instance, as producers, particularly work with first-time directors because they develop voices. So if you're going to be a first-time director, it's the same stuck record thing. Don't do it alone. You need a producer with experience on board, or more than one. Maybe your producer that you've worked with since you've been at film school or that did your short films with you doesn't have that much experience. They're still going to go forward and have another producer, a supervising producer on board. And then they'll help you crew up so that you're surrounded with, there's a space being created for you to make the best possible film. An editor with experience or a DOP with experience or a set designer or in your team, there can be first timers and people with experience. Then everybody's learning from one another. But it's team sport. Because by the way, we can also, for the first time directors, there are also directors and producers that we've all worked with that, you just know it. Listen, by the end of a film, you're either going to work with each other for 100 more films, or you're never going to talk to one another ever again. That's kind of how it works. So, because it's that intense. So there's people that, once you've gone through the film, was like, we can't work with that director. That person just drives us absolutely around the bend. We just can't. So, that happens equally for people with experience. So it remains an ongoing process for all of us.
So a question to you, Diane, also from Cynthia. If we raise money through product placement, will this affect distribution deals with exhibition platforms? I think it's a great question. So product placement, how does that impact your ability to sell a film or a series outside of South Africa if you've product placed here?
It certainly does. It doesn't. It's not as huge as it used to be. In my experience, we generally, I think we're working on 3 or 4 different projects at the moment, relatively big ones. And to be honest, the furthest thing from our mind is product placement. Can we use product placement to try and fund some of this, to try and get it going? I think, to be honest, the better person on this to answer this question would be Helen or Manzeka on the development side of it. Personally, as Gravel Road, we don't look at it very much at all.
Manzeki, Helen, have you looked at product placement or found product placement? Manzeki, go ahead.
I think with the scarcity of money in the market, and it's becoming more and more, even the platforms that are starting to become more relevant is the one that are ad-based, those AVOD, advertiser, sort of really VOD platforms. So there is always opportunities, right? And now more, it's becoming your best way of trying to finance products, if you can. It's just that you have to be very careful how it's done, right? You have to, if it's too in your face, then it feels like an advert, like you're selling a product. So you could almost approach brands. You could do brand partnerships or ways of making sure you incorporate brands into the product you're creating. So, and I think in the olden days, people had this thing called product placement, but it's changed. It's no longer product placement, it's brand integration. How do I integrate brands into the property that I'm creating that speaks to, so I can target a specific audience? It's very important. If you have access to that, it's great, because then it's a way to finance. Platforms, everyone, they know how to work around it. And based on it, we know what is the best way to position a brand in a specific platform. But if you have access to it, then it's great. It's just that it's how you go about it, and yeah.
Okay. When conceptualizing a film or short, if the content is South African with African content, most of the English is, I think he means with African language. Most of the dialogue is in English. What territories should we look at outside of South Africa? So he's basically saying, I've got a piece of work. It's in Zulu with some English. Can I sell this outside of South Africa? And I think it's always going to go back to what's the genre? Is the film
genre?
Genre.
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 Quality.
Is the film good? Yeah, Helen?
And quality, like you said.
And quality. Okay. The question I did ask this to you, Manzeki, a little earlier on, is where is the appetite for our content across the globe? So he's asking, outside of South Africa, in your research and when you're thinking about where you're going to go and try and sell content, where are the territories that you think are more open to content from South Africa?
Yeah, again, it comes back to what you're creating, right? I'll say that. What, of course, we see, let's say, what you're creating, right? And the story and the genre you're creating. So your biggest market is always going to be a domestic market, right? Your local audience, because if what you're creating doesn't work locally, you're almost not going to work anywhere else. So you have to make stories that really work and resonate with you locally. Number two, we do know that a lot of the stories that we've sold that have Black characters and Black stories in North America, which I mean the US, including Canada, because of the amount of African-American, niche market there, then stories, if they have similar characters like us, work, it's a massive market. outside the streamers, right? Because the streamers take global deals, but outside the streamers, North America is great like that. And then, of course, the rest of the world falls in as part of it. But if you're creating high-end Black stories that look like us, that are aspirational, that works, or great stories where we've done sales outside Africa, our biggest market has been North America. The streamers, of course, work differently. They will probably, the things will work in Poland, in different other places. But to sell to those markets on a linear channel is almost impossible. But if you wanted to do anything outside the streamers that has characters that look like me, and again, this is a thing. When you're creating content, if it's African or it's Black, it's deemed Black and African. If it's a totally different look from here, it doesn't mean it's going to work in North America because you're competing against massive. So it has to be the right genre, right? But where you have Black people that look like me, North America, because of its, what do you call, African-American massive niche market, then that's another market for stories that are Black and African.
What about LATAM? How's that doing?
It's very small numbers, very, very small numbers. So even in LATAM, there isn't.
Except for Brazil, and Brazil, unfortunately, having spent a lot of time there,
Yeah.
that you don't see Black people on TV. So even though half the population is of African descent, when you turn on your screens, you don't see that representation. So the people buying aren't going to that audience, and they aren't buying for that audience. And they, of course, that's where the big problem comes in. So even though you've got what should be a big market for content coming out of here, it's not, because the buyers and the broadcasters don't view that as a market for them.
Yeah, and it's only for streamers again. If you put it on a streamer like Netflix, you know you're going to get massive numbers in Brazil, right? Purely because it's already bought. But the moment you start targeting linear, like you said, anything outside the streamers, it's very small. And again, it comes down, as I mentioned earlier, is who's buying and what they're buying. Like I used to sell to Colombia because maybe it's niche for documentaries. I know the buyer, right? So then you could sell. But the moment you start selling, it's hard because they just don't understand. And what they want to feed their specific market linear is all based on programming. But the streamers have come and disrupted. So that's why, hence, I always come to the fact that the streamers are the biggest buyers of the content we create. No doubt. The content we create from here, the streamers are the biggest buyers. Secondary, then you have to go territory per territory, right? Depending which market you're looking for. But it's just, that's what it is. So.
Helen, I'm going to give this to you. How do filmmakers hold cinemas accountable for how your film is screened? For example, how do I make sure that there's not a bad sound? I've seen this happen. A local film played in a faulty CNMA. How do you make sure that your film is being exhibited in the way that it should be exhibited by a cinema grouping, for example?
Well, firstly, the exhibitors obviously right now have just survived COVID. So you can take it as a given that, considering the fact that their revenue was cut right back to, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, 15% to 20% of what they earned previously, maintenance obviously would in certain instances would have taken strain. So if we're talking about where we are now, I know we've got historical issues as well, but just for where we are now, that's a reality. So that screen also plays the way it plays, right? So this week, your film may be playing on it. Next week, Top Gun may be playing on it. And the week after, my Little Pink Princess may be playing on it, whatever it is that's coming through. It is a maintenance and scenario right now. So if there's a complex that needs maintenance, the way to hold them accountable is that we just constantly have to flag issues where there are issues and go to the cinema manager. You'll walk out and say, the sound is off. And then they'll check, because sometimes what happens is it literally breaks in the 10 o'clock show, a speaker blows. So then tonight at 5 o'clock or whatever, you go and watch it, and no one flagged it in the prior shows because maybe there were only a few people. And they don't. The cinema staff right now, and whilst cinema is recovering, just in my opinion, don't have the capacity to have additional staff on the payroll to ensure that all the cinemas keep trading, that we have a circuit after everybody, or various circuits after everybody's recovered from COVID. So it's like any other film. If you're watching any film, if something sounds wrong, you go out and you tell the person on duty, sounds like a speaker blew. They may already know, and they were waiting for the tech people to come and fix it. They may not know. You may be the one that flags it if they didn't, play through in the morning on a particular screen. So to hold them accountable is ultimately actually just, communicating with them like you would as a viewer, whether you're watching, because remember, you're paying the same ticket price anyway. For any film that you watch, your ticket pricing is determined by format. So it's IMAX, 3D, D-Box, 4DX, 2D, kids, pensioners, regular, movie club. So it's communication, and all the exhibitors have, email addresses where you can contact them. So that's how you hold any retail environment accountable. If you in Edgar's and they have change rooms or whatever that's got an issue, whatever, you tell the person there, this is broken. Please fix it. It will be fixed. It may not be fixed at that moment, because if you have to call a technician out, or if it's a globe that has to be replaced or a speaker that has to be replaced, it may take time. It may not happen for the very next show. But that would be my view. Because we work with the local producers, pretty much exclusively, there's always a bush telegraph going on amongst us, to say, someone was here, that's out. Someone was there, that's out. And we let the exhibitors know immediately, typically, and then they address it. Sometimes files fail. There's a power outage, and everything was working just fine. And that particular complex doesn't have a generator. So when it comes back online again, some file corrupted. So it's only playing sound out the left-hand speakers, or, it's not playing on all 7 channels. It's only come out of 3, like the front and 2 of the back ones. So it's a hardcore manual environment. We have to feed back whenever there's an issue. That's how we hold them accountable. They don't want people to walk out of their cinemas. They want to sell tickets, I promise you.
Indeed.
And also, I'd like to add, being at New Metro for 5 years, it's also very important that, and your distributor again comes in very handy in these sessions, because if you're playing a film and you're throwing it onto a screen and it shouldn't be scope, it should be flat, it should be this, etc. It's up to your distributor to ensure that cinema manager and her cinema, the content managers, etc., New Metro and Stikinico and the rest of them know. They've got that email, they're understanding, we're following up, we're doing all these sorts of things. I've only ever experienced, and I'm not just biased, that the cinemas are more than willing to adapt and help and support wherever they can, as long as, like Helen says, you have to just communicate.
Great. This is for you, Diane. I just saw that the pitching competition is closed at Gravel Road's Distributors. Is there another way of pitching to you, Diane? How do I get hold of you, Diane? How do I pitch to you now that you've closed your forum?
Go to the website, you'll see there's a whole long terms and conditions on there. Yeah, but the official pitching competition has closed. But yeah, if you can find my email address, we're always happy to listen to a pitch. So just get hold of me directly and we can take it from there. But the competition itself is closed. Yes.
Great. Manzeki, I'm going to throw this at you. Can I self-fund my own film? This is from Asake. Can I self-fund my own film project, negotiate with the broadcaster for placement slots, and retain full ownership of my work, and also receive adequate royalties / residuals?
Yeah, listen, I guess, has this person made anything before?
I don't know. I'm but they're on the opposite end of YouTube.
No.
Unfortunately,
I guess. Listen, if when you say self-fund, and then negotiate a slot, like there's 2 different, things in one. So I think if you wanted to self-finance your own property in order to exploit, right, in any manner, what you're going to spend has to be relative to what you potentially think you're going to get. So because when you say self-fund, for me, it gives an idea that I'm going to go make my own thing. Then once I've finished it, then I'm going to go negotiate with the broadcaster to find a slot. Now, is that good to do? Are you trying to get, are you doing a brand / exchange? I'm not too sure what that model is, right? So if it's the best way to sort of answer is, if you want to create and self-fund your own thing and sell it afterwards, of course you can do that. But just you have to understand that what you make it for might not yield what you intend to get as revenue. You could go directly to any broadcaster and do any deal you want to do. But retaining IP and copyright, if you've created something yourself, you finance it yourself, of course you're going to retain your IP. You know, you're going to get a certain percentage of license towards what you've created from the broadcaster. So because you spend the money, you're the one who took the risk. If the broadcaster had paid for everything, then it's a totally different negotiation, because then IP is a thing that is negotiated depending on what that is. So yes, go self-funded, but lower your expectation in terms of revenue and how you structure the deals, because it may not be what you think it is, basically.
Great, guys. That's the questions from the floor. I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time. But before you leave, I'd like for each of you to give one bit of the best advice you can to a filmmaker out there in relation to distribution. And I'm going to start with, who should I start with? With Diane.
I'm probably the most wet behind the ears, but the best bit of distribution advice that I can give you is get a distributor on board as soon as possible. Again, my question is, understand the market before you even decide to create your content, whatever it is, series. Do some research, know what's happening in the cinemas, know what's happening in the market, know what your audience is capable of it, and know where you're going to sell it. We're making far too many films that are just not hitting the mark at all, and it's costing a lot of money, and we're just not seeing it make any commercial viability at all. So understand the market, use the things like the NFVFs, use these opportunities to really fund and develop and get to know what's going on in the South African film industry.
Right. Manzeki?
For me, is from a perspective of the value we bring into projects, is that I think is a collaboration agreement. So if you want to create properties, that way you want to mitigate your risk in terms of production versus return on investment. We are your best, what you call your best partner. At the same time, I stand by the fact that I think we are spoiled in South Africa per se, unlike the continent, where there is a lot of financing involved, as well as all the platforms and streamers are coming into the market. So there is a potential for what the market wants, but we ought to have to be very careful in terms of what we create, because all the money comes and it's very state funded. The creatives tends to think they can do things however they want. So they're basically making the movies for the government, where the money comes from. So I just say, just be aware, because that becomes the disadvantage for the local market, is that when there's plenty money going around, which means the content that's being created is never market focused.
Okay, be market focused. And Helen, for you, biggest bit of advice?
Watch films. Don't just wake up in the morning with an idea thinking this is your passion project and you're going to make it and it's going to change the world. It may happen. It has happened. But I think just to have respect for your peers that have put in the hard work that you admire. You may have your favorite local director or your favorite local actor or whoever it may be. They put in a hell of a lot of work to get to that point where they can showcase their work and their talents in the context of films. You can get there, but watch films. You can't just watch your favorite films again and again and again and think they are blockbusters, and that means your film will be a blockbuster. You've got to watch a wide variety of content to have a sense of what it does. Otherwise, when we sit and have the discussion with you as a distributor, and we say these are the top performing films, you may hate all of those films on a personal level, and you don't need to make them. You just need to understand what kind of film fits into the matrix in which space. And that's impossible to understand if you're not watching the content. And it's critical if you're in content, I think, to have a view of the content that's coming out from your peers around you. And you don't have to like all of their films. You don't have to want to make that film. But that's how you build your own understanding of what fits where and the peculiarities of audiences. Because there's always trends, and then there's always, every now and again, one exception to the rule. But generally, 95% of the time, 99% of the time, we're all going to work within the trend. And that's the bread and butter part, I guess, of the business for you to produce and write and us to distribute. And it is collaboration, just like Manzeki says. It's a partner, just like Diane says. But be in content if you're in content, not in a bubble of content.
Thank you so much, my panel. Thank you for this very insightful hour or two you've given us. I think this is really incredibly important for our filmmakers to understand the entire cycle of how a film works, but very specifically around distribution. I know that we're a sector that is very used to, specifically on the TV side, to commissioning and not owning our own IP and not going out and working with distributors. And hopefully sessions like these will start changing filmmakers' perceptions of what they need to be doing and speaking to you guys as early as possible. So thank you so much for your time and effort and for your insights and for the education. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Thandi.
Thank you, Thandi. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to our
Cheers.
audience.
Thanks, Thandi.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.